Greetings, salutations. Welcome to another COK-RantTalk with your man with the mic, Prestigious G. It's good to be back. Like I said before, forgive me for my impromptu absency. This stagflation is not really being kind to people, but like I say, I'm always here trying to give you the best dose of knowledge and wisdom that I can. So let's get into this topic. This little rant talk is called "Being the Black Sheep." So, being the black sheep of let's start with why I chose this subject. I chose this subject because let's try it like this. I know when by the age of 10 years old, I figured out that I was different than most of the individuals in my family. I talked a specific vernacular. I had a particular type of attributes and personality that wasn't really portrayed in my particular peer group in school. And for one thing, I was a little different at home. Well, I wouldn't say at home per se. Excuse me. I was basically different. I knew I was different than most of my family. And I wouldn't say my mom capitalized on it, but she saw it. And she pointed me in a pretty good direction where I could basically get involved in certain activities and such. I was put in a magnet program at a young age, and I stayed there for a pretty good long while before I was sent back to public school for things that I'm not really want to discuss. But when I went to public school, things changed because I realized I was entirely ostracized because I was very much different than one of the kids in the public school. I went to a majority black school, and I was basically the nerdy smart kid. I basically did my homework, made sure I did exactly what the teacher said, and some kids saw to that I was not that type. But getting to the whole topic, a little bit of backstory. Basically, the black sheep of the family is an individual who shows a different type of personality that is, I would say, beyond normal or maybe above average than what it's in their individual intermediate family shows. And sometimes when you are the black sheep of the family, you particularly are the individual when something goes wrong or something is out of line. You are the first person that they look to, whether it be good or bad. Now, one thing I will say with being the black sheep is one benefit I would say is that you have a sixth sense for things, and you see things, especially when in your family, that things are not right. One particular item per se that persuades people to be different is because they've seen what not being different has done. And by that I mean you basically see your families, the hypocrisies and the unstable functions and unstable foundations within your family. That's another trait that a lot of people who are the black sheep of their family, they see the toxic traits in their families. I, for one, for personal experience, know it very much so. You basically call out everybody. You basically call out on everybody's bullshit, and you very much so get flamed for it, per se. Because unfortunately, That's another thing. A person, the black sheep, tends to rock the boat, and unfortunately, most people, they don't like people who rock the boat because it makes them eyeball things that are wrong with their lives, and it forces them to have to look at them from a different perspective and have to see if they want to change it or not. And as we all know, humans are creatures of habit, and they tend to like things the way they are. They like to stay in their comfort zone. So when you see things that are not necessarily what you've been doing on a regulatory state and are acclimated to those actions, and you see that they are actually detrimental, it's hard for you to try to change that. There are some, and that's another thing about being the black sheep. You basically are the one who you have that responsibility thrusted upon you. That's the problem with a lot of. I see that with a lot of. I'm not trying to make this like a black corner talk, but I see that with a lot of young black men. They are, especially who are from single parent homes, they are thrusted with responsibilities at a incredibly young age that they just aren't ready for, and as such, that tends to make them grow up and be resentful to some degree. And some people, it tends to, in a situation, it can either make you or break you. Some people will become acclimated to the toxic traits within their family, and some will, they will see it and they will, they will say, that's not for me. That's not what I want. And that's the thing about being a black sheep. You want change. You want a different environment. One thing, that's a little piece of advice I can give you. The thing about it is, when you're the black sheep of the family, it's hard to tune out all of the negativity that spews around people, because you either live with them or you can't. There's something that's always keeping you around, because at the end of the day, they are your family and you came from them. So, and that's understandable to want to get away. The best way, in my opinion, is to tune out sort of negativity. Especially if you still are with your family, probably music is a good coping mechanism, especially something that smooths you out. For me personally, it's smooth jazz. I feel like it's kind of a representation of myself. Not to toot my own horn, of course. But one thing I do notice is that when you're the black sheep, you tend to point out most of the negativity, and that can lead you to a loop to be a lot of things. Another thing that a lot of people, when you're a black sheep, it's kind of hard to be yourself around your family, because you understand that you're not like them, and unfortunately, you understand that it's never going to be the atmosphere is never going to be as quintessentially pure when you're there, because your two attributes will not connect well. So that's why that's what's the reason why a lot of people who are black sheep, they tend to be they try to push themselves, or they isolate themselves from their family, because in your heart you're not like them, and you're going to be the one to ruin the vibe, and that also makes you upset, because you don't want to kill off or give the wrong feeling to people. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. But to get on with my point of this little rant, the reason I chose it is because I chose this subject because I notice a lot of people, it's hard for a lot of people to deal with who they are, because especially when we're living in a society where people who have a difference of an opinion can sometimes be put to the wayside and be ostracized. That was another word I could use for it, but I can't really think of it right now. And that's what I mean. When you're different than most people tend to notice that, and they will either exploit you or they will try to just outright reject you. Another thing is you tend to have different beliefs other than them as well, because you see things in a very different light. While everybody else has a myopic or tunnel vision of a certain circumstance or idea, you have a myopic, you have a multicolored, you see things through a multicolored lens. And some people don't have that ability, but you do, since you're the black sheep, because, everything's different from you for a different perspective. And as such, you tend to be misunderstood because of this. Now, some negatives of being the black sheep, which I just explained earlier, is you won't be invited to any of the family gatherings, or people just won't be around you because, you see, like I said, you see things differently, and nobody's going to really agree with you. And if you're a strong-willed person, you'll stand strongly on your beliefs. So that's definitely a downside to being a black sheep. But sometimes, one thing I'm here to say about being the black sheep is that don't be afraid to think differently than other people. When you're going one way in life and somebody in the majority of the herd is going in one direction, don't be afraid to stray from the path that's easiest because other people are going there, because you might see it as being too easy as least of a challenge. And as all we've seen through most things in life, the path of least resistance often yields very poor results, while as the path with most resistance, it's more of a struggle, but the reward tends to be much greater. Now, that's not a guarantee with everything, but if something you want out of life, if it's something you really want out of life and it's something that's worth going after, sometimes the struggle can be worth it. I wholeheartedly agree that being the black sheep of the family does come with its trials and tribulations, but especially being in, especially when black households, if you are different than most people, it's gonna show, and people will definitely cap on to what you are, especially at a young age. And it depends, because if you have an aptitude for a certain criteria or skill, depending on how people see you, they will actually either exploit you, or they will try to see that as a way for them to be helpful to your society. Now, putting everything and tying it up into a nice red bow, I will say it like this: to all the people who my alternative kids, the retro kids, nerdy kids who, individual, not just kids, and my men, women, to all people who is listening right now, don't be afraid to be different. Don't be afraid to go against the grain. Being the black sheep of the family can have its downsides. It can. I can't use the words. There are other words I can use, but I can't really come off the top of my head. But it can be troublesome. It's also the path that it will be a lonely path, because most people won't really see things in your perspective or your light. And that's okay. That's okay. It's not a bad thing when people see things your way, and it's not a bad thing when you don't see them their way. But one thing I will say, don't let others diminish your light because they're too busy scrounging around in the darkness. You have an intelligence and a type of persona that radiates something that can be useful to not only your society but your community as well. So, with that being said, being a black sheep, be proud of that. Don't let anyone dismiss your talents or your gifts all because you're different. Truth, wisdom, and knowledge, everyone. This is Prestige, signing off.